Sometimes in small towns, the sun seems to set slower just so the shadows have time to creep in and remind you where you stand. That's how it felt for Jamal every evening in Hartswell, Texas, a place where everyone knew your name, your family, and most painfully, where you didn't belong. At 15, Jamal had already learned how to shrink himself, how to keep his voice low and his gaze lower, how to move through the world like a shadow. He was smart, quick-witted, and tougher than most gave him credit for. But in this town, none of that seemed to matter. Not when your skin was darker than the dirt in the fields, and your family didn't own land or cattle or the keys to anything but a tired old apartment above the laundromat. On a Saturday evening painted in gold and lavender, Jamal stepped off the rattling town bus at Wilson's Gas and Grill, the only gas station for 20 miles. His mom, Angela, had sent him to grab bread and milk before she headed out for the night shift. He kept his headphones on as he walked, even though the battery was dead. The music in his mind was enough to keep out the world's noise, but he couldn't drown out the laughter echoing from the side of the building. Travis Duvall's red pickup sat parked with its tailgate down, the Duvall boys and their friends draped across it like a pack of foxes, watching, always watching. Travis, a year older but already talking like his daddy's name made him mayor, called out the moment he spotted Jamal. "Well, look who finally crawled out from under his rock," Travis sneered. The other teens snickered, eyes sharp as broken glass. Reed Duvall, his younger brother, spat a sunflower seed shell at Jamal's sneakers. "You here to beg for change or just picking up trash?" Jamal's jaw tensed, but he kept his head down, pushing past. "Just here to buy groceries. Leave me alone," he said, voice calm, heart pounding. Travis slid off the truck, blocking Jamal's way to the store. "Kids like you should stick to what you're good at, picking up after the rest of us." His breath smelled like cheap soda and something meaner. Jamal stared at the cracked concrete. He wanted to shout, to tell them they were wrong, but knew it would only give them something to laugh about. Instead, he sidestepped, moving toward the door. That was when Reed shoved him hard from behind. Jamal stumbled but caught himself, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him fall. A few grown-ups at the pumps looked up, but quickly turned away. The sheriff's cruiser sat nearby, engine running, Sheriff Bill sipping his coffee, pretending he didn't see a thing. Jamal's stomach twisted. He knew better than to expect help from anyone wearing a badge in Hartswell. Travis leaned in close, voice low. "Just remember, folks around here don't like troublemakers. You start anything, you finish it alone." Jamal bit back his anger, blinking away the sting behind his eyes. He straightened up, looked Travis in the face, and managed a quiet, "I'm not looking for trouble." Then he pushed past, finally making it into the store, grabbing what he needed as quickly as he could. Inside, Miss Loretta at the counter watched with tired eyes but didn't say a word. Jamal handed her a wrinkled $5 bill, his hands still shaking. "Thank you, ma'am," he murmured. As he stepped outside, the group was gone, the pickup's engine fading into the distance. But the words, and the humiliation, hung in the air, heavy and sour. Jamal sucked in a breath and forced himself to walk slow, not to run, not to let them see how bad they'd gotten to him. The sun was almost gone now, dragging streaks of shadow across the road. Jamal cut through the back alley, past the old feed store, past broken fences, and overgrown lots that no one bothered to fix anymore. He needed to clear his head, to walk off the ache in his chest. He thought about his grandma, about how she used to tell him, "Never let them steal your shine, baby. Don't let them turn your heart hard." But it was hard not to feel bitter when the world kept closing doors in your face. He wandered farther than he meant to, letting the anger burn out until only sadness was left. That's when he heard it. A sharp, desperate sound, half scream, half snort, coming from the edge of a patch of woods that bordered the town. Jamal paused, heart thumping. He heard it again, a thrashing, frantic sound, like something fighting for its life. He followed the noise, picking his way through weeds and tangled brush, until he saw it. A horse, black as midnight, caught in a snarl of barbed wire at the far end of a forgotten pasture. The animal's eyes rolled wild with terror, nostrils flaring, blood streaking its leg where the wire bit deep. Every time the horse pulled, the wire tightened, cutting cruelly. Jamal's fear faded into something fiercer, determination. He crept closer, arms out, voice low. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The horse thrashed, kicking up dirt. But Jamal stayed steady, talking soft like his grandma used to. "You're not alone. I got you. I promise." He pulled out the little pocket knife his grandma had given him, hands trembling. Step by careful step, he worked at the wire, whispering nonsense and prayers. The horse snorted, wide-eyed and shaking, but somehow, miraculously, led him close enough to cut the first strand. Then the next. The wire snapped free with a sharp twang, and the horse staggered, bleeding but alive. Jamal sank to his knees, breathing hard. The horse didn't run. He watched Jamal, trembling, eyes wide and dark. But there was a flicker of hope there, a silent question, maybe even trust. Jamal touched his shoulder, voice soft. "I think I'll call you Shadow. We're both a little lost out here, huh?" The horse bobbed its head, as if agreeing, and as dusk swallowed the last light, Jamal knew this was the beginning of something bigger than either of them. A promise made, and a new shadow cast across a town that might finally have to see them both. Jamal didn't go home, not right away. He shoved his hands deeper into his jacket, feeling the hot sting in his chest and the fading ache where Travis's elbow had dug into his side. The humiliation from the gas station stuck to his skin like sweat. He turned away from the main road and slipped behind the old feed store, skirting the edges of backyards and fence lines. He didn't want to be seen. He just wanted to breathe. The sun was nearly gone now, the sky turning black at the edges, stars pricking through like tiny silver knives. The fields behind the gas station were wide and lonely, split by rusted barbed wire fences and patches of wildflowers that fought their way through the drought-burned grass. Jamal moved quickly, hoping no one from the Duval clan would bother coming out this far after dark. He just needed to walk off the anger, let the cool air calm him down. But then a sound stopped him, a harsh, desperate snort, followed by a sharp, frantic movement in the shadows. Jamal froze, heart hammering. There it was again, louder, more frantic. He crouched down, eyes searching the gloom, until he saw it. Something large, dark, and tangled in the wire near the tree line. Jamal's feet moved before his brain could argue. He crept closer, the shape becoming clearer. A horse, black as midnight, wild-eyed and panicked. The animal's flanks heaved with every breath. Its back leg was twisted, caught deep in a snarl of barbed wire. Each time it jerked, the wire cut deeper, dark blood soaking into the dirt. Jamal swallowed. He'd seen horses up close before, but never like this. Never so raw and desperate. Never so close to dying. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see a pickup's headlights cutting through the darkness. But the fields were empty. Just him, the wire, and the horse. "It's okay," he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Easy, boy, easy." He inched forward, hands out, palms open. The horse pinned its ears, white rim showing in one terrified eye, then jerked again, the wire digging in deeper. Jamal's heart was thumping so hard he thought he'd pass out. He'd never done anything like this before. He wasn't sure if he should run or cry or just stay perfectly still. But something in the horse's gaze, something wild and wounded, but not quite gone, held him. Jamal took another slow step, then another, until he was close enough to smell the sweat and fear rolling off the animal's hide. He knelt, scanning the tangled mess. The barbed wire was tight, but there was a spot where it had bunched and twisted, not yet cutting straight to the bone. "Hold on, I got you," Jamal murmured, voice trembling. He reached into his pocket for his keychain. He always carried a little folding pocket knife, a gift from his grandma before she passed. He flicked the blade open, its tiny edge gleaming in the faint light. He slid closer, knees sinking into the dry earth. The horse snorted, nearly rearing, but Jamal ducked his head, whispering, "Shh, shh, it's okay. You're not alone. Just let me help." The horse trembled, every muscle quivering. Jamal took a breath, reached out, and, hand shaking, began to saw at the wire, slow and careful. The first few passes did nothing. The horse flinched. Jamal whispered soft nonsense. Every word meant more to calm himself than the animal. "You're good, you're good, you're okay, you're gonna be okay." He cut faster, his own panic rising with the smell of blood. The wire finally gave with a sharp, metallic snap. The horse whinnied, kicking free, almost catching Jamal in the face. He threw himself backward, landing hard, dust filling his nose and mouth, but the horse didn't bolt. It staggered, legs shaking, sides heaving, looking down at Jamal with a wary, exhausted gaze. Jamal rolled onto his knees, breathing hard, feeling the sting of a scrape along his elbow where he'd hit the ground. The horse pawed the earth, testing its wounded leg, and Jamal could see the damage, blood, but not too deep. Nothing looked broken. He stayed very still, hoping the animal wouldn't run and get hurt worse in the dark. "Hey," he whispered, breathless. "You're free. See? You're okay." The horse lowered its head, snuffling at the grass, eyes never leaving Jamal's. There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretched out forever. Then the animal took a shaky step toward him. Jamal almost didn't breathe. He slowly reached out, palm open. And after a long pause, the horse's velvety nose brushed his hand, quick and trembling. For a split second, they just existed there, two abandoned souls in the moonlight, each just as scared and lost as the other. Jamal swallowed, the lump in his throat tight and raw. "I'm gonna call you Shadow," he said, voice cracking. "Yeah, Shadow fits you." The horse flicked an ear. Jamal smiled, wiped at his face and looked back over the fields. He knew he couldn't leave Shadow out here, not with the wound and not with coyotes and fences and people like Travis prowling around. But there wasn't time to figure out everything right now. There was only tonight, only this moment, and the start of something new. "I got you, Shadow," he whispered, standing up, voice steadier now. "We look out for each other, all right?" He took one last look at the horse, memorizing the shape in the half-light, then turned for home. Tomorrow he'd come back. He'd figure something out. For now, it was enough to know that neither of them was alone in the dark anymore. Jamal spent the rest of that night tossing in bed. Images of Shadow's frightened eyes burned into his memory. His ears strained for every sound, the hum of his mom's old box fan, the creak of floorboards, the distant calls of coyotes that prowled the Texas outskirts. He couldn't shake the feeling that Shadow was out there, waiting for him, desperate and hurting, just as he'd been not so long ago. In that moment, something unspoken grew inside Jamal, a purpose that reached deeper than his anger at the world. The next evening, as dusk crept in, Jamal packed a backpack with whatever he could find. Half a loaf of bread, a few apples, a battered plastic water jug. He waited for his mom, Angela, to finish her shift at the diner, then called out that he was headed to Carlos's for homework. She looked at him over her reading glasses, lips pursed, but nodded. "Be back before midnight, all right?" Jamal flashed a smile, feeling guilty, and slipped out into the cooling air. Navigating the backfields by memory, Jamal clutched his phone tightly, playing animal care videos he'd found online, searching for tips about cleaning wounds and feeding horses. He squinted at the tiny screen, pausing every few steps to listen for the sound of hooves or wild dogs. His heart thudded in his chest as he neared the fence where he'd left Shadow. He half expected the horse to be gone, but as he crept up, he spotted the dark figure, head lowered, tail flicking at flies. Relief surged through Jamal. He knelt, holding out a piece of bread. "Hey, Shadow. It's me," he whispered, voice shaky. "I brought you something." Shadow eyed him warily, but the scent of food won out. He edged closer, lips brushing Jamal's palm, snatching up the bread and snorting softly. Jamal set the water down, watching the horse lap it up, foam trickling down his muzzle. The wound on Shadow's leg looked red and angry. Dried blood caked around it. Jamal's fingers trembled as he reached out, but Shadow didn't pull away. Gently, Jamal pressed the corner of his shirt to the wound, cleaning it as best he could, whispering calming nonsense under his breath. "Easy. Easy. I'm right here, boy." Every night after that, Jamal made his secret journey, sneaking food and water out to Shadow and tending to his wounds. He scoured YouTube for advice. How to disinfect a cut with household stuff, how to check for infection, even how to whisper to a nervous horse. He learned to bring carrots and apples, to keep his movements slow and his voice low, to read the animal's moods in the flick of an ear or the swish of a tail. Shadow began to trust him, just a little more each night. He'd nicker softly at Jamal's approach, meeting him by the fence line, head bobbing in anticipation. For the first time in months, Jamal felt needed. He could almost forget how the town treated him, how teachers barely remembered his name, how the Duvals laughed and the sheriff looked the other way. Out here under the big Texas sky, there was no one to sneer, no one to shove him aside. He started talking to Shadow as he worked. At first, it was just practical stuff. What he was doing, why the ointment stung, how many days it might take for the wound to heal. But soon, words tumbled out he'd never spoken to anyone, not even Carlos. He told Shadow about his grandma, about how she used to tell stories about wild mustangs running free across the plains, about the day she died, and how quiet the house felt afterward. He whispered his fears, his loneliness, how some nights he stared at the ceiling wishing he could just disappear. Shadow listened, his big dark eyes calm and unjudging. One night, as Jamal stroked the horse's mane, a tear slipped down his cheek. He wiped it away quick, hoping no one, man or beast, noticed. "You know," he said quietly, "maybe you're the only one who really sees me, Shadow. Not just another face in the crowd." The days stretched into weeks. Shadow's wound began to heal, the raw edges knitting together under Jamal's clumsy but careful care. The horse's coat grew glossier, his ribs less visible as Jamal snuck leftovers and borrowed carrots from home. Jamal read everything he could find, old library books about horses, printouts from dusty websites, even a worn manual he found in his mom's closet. Angela, sharp as ever, started to notice Jamal's late-night disappearances and the food that went missing. She'd find muddy shoes by the back door or catch a whiff of hay on his clothes. But when she asked, Jamal just shrugged, just walking around, thinking. She studied him a moment longer, eyes softening, then let him go. Maybe she sensed what he was building in the darkness, a fragile, growing hope. One Saturday, while Jamal sat brushing Shadow's coat, he heard footsteps behind him and spun around, startled. It was Carlos, grinning wide, holding a bag of apples. "You really found a horse, man," he laughed, eyes shining with awe. "I thought you were just making up stories." Jamal shook his head, feeling a rare burst of pride. "He's real, all right, and he's got nobody but me." The two friends sat side by side in the grass, feeding Shadow, talking about dreams bigger than the town that tried to keep them small. Under the blanket of night, the world felt bigger and kinder. Jamal began to wonder if, just maybe, they could build something lasting, something no one could take away. He watched as Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound of distant thunder, and for the first time, Jamal let himself believe in tomorrow. Back at home, Angela watched her son slip inside quietly, face glowing with a quiet determination she hadn't seen since his grandma died. She said nothing, just pulled him close for a moment, then let him go. In her heart, she hoped whatever he'd found out there in the darkness was enough to help him find his way back to the light. Morning light spilled over the town's rooftops, casting long stripes across Jamal's cluttered bedroom floor. He awoke with a start, heart racing, still half dreaming of thundering hooves and open fields. In the haze between sleep and waking, he heard his mom's voice drifting through the cracked door. Angela was already up, singing softly as she brewed her first pot of coffee. Her voice, warm and steady, always had a way of settling his nerves. But there was no time to linger. Jamal was up and dressed before the song was over, slipping on old jeans and a faded t-shirt, boots caked in last night's mud. He grabbed a handful of granola bars and stuffed them in his backpack, pausing only to scribble a note on the fridge. Gone to Carlos's to study, back by noon. He doubted Angela would believe it, but she'd let it slide, just like she always did when she sensed something mattered. The sky was clear, blue stretching wide above as Jamal cut through the backyards and alleys, heading toward the abandoned lot where Shadow waited. The horse was grazing near the edge of the fence, ears flicking in greeting as Jamal drew close. Jamal smiled, reaching out to scratch the animal's cheek, feeling a jolt of pride at how Shadow barely flinched now. Carlos was already there, pacing circles around the ruins of an old barn. The place had belonged to some farmer long gone, now nothing more than a weathered frame, tin roof half collapsed, weeds choking the yard. Carlos waved a hammer in greeting, grinning. "This thing's older than my grandma, but I think we can fix it up." Jamal laughed, the sound light and easy. "We gotta try. Shadow needs shelter. Can't have him out in the rain." He hesitated, glancing at the barn's sagging beams. "We'll need a lot of work, though." They set to it right away, scavenging boards from the junk pile, nailing together a patchwork of walls and clearing out decades of dust and spiderwebs. Sweat ran down Jamal's back as he hauled wood and hammered nails, hands blistering but determined. Carlos climbed onto the creaking rafters, tightening old bolts and shouting down jokes that made Jamal's sides hurt from laughter. For a few hours, all that existed was the barn, the tools, and the rhythm of work. As they worked, Shadow lingered nearby, watching with curious eyes. The horse seemed to sense the energy, wandering into the shade to nibble at a pile of fresh hay Jamal had managed to borrow from the edge of the Duval's pasture. Now and then, Jamal would stop to stroke Shadow's neck, murmuring quiet encouragement, feeling a bond grow with every touch. By midday, sweat-stained and hungry, the boys stepped back to survey their progress. The barn still looked rough, but there was shelter, a dry corner where Shadow could rest without fear of rain or wind. Carlos whooped, tossing his hammer aside. We did it, man. He's got a real home now. Jamal grinned, wiping grime from his face, then turned serious. We gotta keep this a secret, though. If the wrong people find out. He didn't finish the sentence. Both of them knew what he meant. Out here, secrets were the only way to survive. For weeks, the old barn became their refuge. Jamal and Carlos fixed fence posts, swept out stalls, and made nightly trips to haul in feed and water. Every improvement made Shadow more relaxed. The horse started coming when called, nickering softly and pressing his nose into Jamal's chest. Carlos watched in amazement, shaking his head, never seen a horse trust someone so fast. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Jamal heard the crunch of footsteps behind him and tensed. He turned, expecting trouble, but it was his mom, Angela, standing in the doorway with a small first aid kit and a knowing smile. You boys really think you could keep something like this from me? Jamal's face fell, shame and fear mixing in his chest. I'm sorry, Mom. I couldn't let him die out here. Angela stepped forward, kneeling beside Shadow, her fingers gentle as she inspected the healing wound. You did good, baby, she said quietly. Your grandma would be proud. She opened the kit and began cleaning the cut. Her movements practiced, efficient. Jamal watched, surprised as his mom worked. He'd almost forgotten she'd grown up around horses herself, back before city life and hard times took over. Carlos grinned, nudging Jamal. Looks like we've got backup now. Angela chuckled, glancing at the boys. I won't tell, if you let me help. She showed them how to mix a poultice from kitchen herbs, how to check for fever, how to brush Shadow's coat so it gleamed in the fading light. She brought bags of feed from her paycheck, and even an old saddle from her own childhood, dusty but still strong. As night fell, the barn filled with quiet laughter and the soft sound of Shadow munching hay. For the first time in months, Jamal felt like part of a family again, a strange, secret family held together by hope and hard work. Angela sat on a hay bale, telling stories of her own wild rides as a girl, of horses she'd loved and lost, her voice weaving a new history for them all. Jamal lay back on the barn floor, staring up at the hole in the roof where stars peeked through. He felt something warm settle in his chest, a sense of belonging, of purpose. For the first time, the anger that followed him everywhere seemed to fade, replaced by the steady certainty that he could make a difference, even if only for one wounded animal. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the grass and sending the scent of summer rain through the barn. Jamal reached out and rested his hand on Shadow's side, feeling the horse's breath rise and fall, steady and strong. In that moment, anything felt possible. No matter how the world looked at them, here in this battered old barn, they were building something real, something that just might last. It didn't take long for the rumors to start swirling. In a small Texas town like Hartswell, secrets had the lifespan of a summer storm, loud, fast, and gone before you could find shelter. At first, the whispers were harmless. Someone saw Jamal sneaking down the back road at dusk. Another spotted Carlos lugging a bag of feed. But by the next week, stories started to twist in the mouths of town gossips. Jamal could hear them before he even walked into the market. You hear what that boy's up to out at the old Miller place? Stealing, probably. Always thought he was trouble, just like his daddy. The worst came when Travis Duvall himself rolled up in his father's new SUV, windows down, blasting country music. Jamal was leaving the general store with a bag of apples tucked under his arm, treats for Shadow, when Travis and his gang cut him off in the parking lot. Travis leaned out, sunglasses glinting, and sneered, "What's in the bag, Jamal? Horse food? Or just stealing like usual?" Jamal kept his head down, refusing to answer, but the boys circled him like buzzards. Reed Duval spat at his feet. "Saw you skulking around our pasture, too. That horse you've been hiding, it's probably ours. Mom says you're just waiting to ride off with something that doesn't belong to you." The word ours hung in the air like a threat, heavy with old grudges. Inside the store, Miss Loretta watched the scene unfold but said nothing. People were quick to judge, even quicker to forget their own kindness when the Duvals were involved. Jamal gritted his teeth and pushed past, heart pounding, determined not to give Travis the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. But the fear was real. He couldn't protect Shadow if the whole town turned against him. That night, Jamal and Carlos met in the barn, their voices low and worried. Carlos handed over a stack of old newspapers. "They're saying animal control is coming out here. Duvals called them, said you stole a purebred. What if they take Shadow away?" Jamal clenched his fists. They can't prove anything. Shadow doesn't have a brand, no microchip, nothing. He was starving and tangled up in wire. "I saved him, Carlos. I'm not just giving him up." Angela overheard the worry in her son's voice and sat them both down at the battered kitchen table. Her eyes, stern but loving, locked on Jamal's. "If animal control comes, you stay calm. You tell them the truth, but you let me handle the rest." Jamal nodded, but anxiety gnawed at his stomach for the rest of the night. He sat up late, listening for sirens that never came. 2 days later, a white van pulled into the overgrown lot beside the barn. 2 officers in crisp uniforms stepped out, clipboards in hand. Behind them, Mr. Duval's shiny truck idled, Travis grinning in the front seat. Angela was ready. She stood by Shadow's stall, arms folded, waiting. "Ma'am," the taller officer began, "we received a report about a stolen horse, possibly belonging to the Duval family." Angela's chin lifted. "You're welcome to check for yourself. This horse was found abandoned, tangled in barbed wire. He's unbranded, no microchip, and severely malnourished. He would have died if my son hadn't helped him. That's not stealing. That's rescue." Jamal stood beside Shadow, gently stroking the horse's muzzle. The officers approached with a scanner, running it over Shadow's neck and flank. The machine beeped once, then fell silent. No chip. The officers looked at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. Mr. Duval got out of his truck, stomping over with a bluster. "That's our horse, I tell you. Thunderbolt's colt. Lost 3 months back. You can't just let them keep him." But the evidence wasn't there. One officer shook his head. "No microchip, no brand, and no missing animal report filed until today, sir. We can't seize a horse with no proof of ownership." Travis's face twisted in frustration. He glared at Jamal. "This isn't over, you hear? You'll regret this." The threat clung in the air long after the trucks pulled away. Angela hugged Jamal close, her voice trembling but proud. "You did everything right, baby. Let them talk. You saved a life. Remember that." Still, the encounter left Jamal rattled. He knew it wasn't the end. As days passed, whispers followed Jamal wherever he went. Some people looked at him with new suspicion, others with a glimmer of respect. Carlos tried to keep his spirits up, telling jokes and making big plans, but even he grew quiet at times. "Man, what if you raced him at the fair?" Carlos said one evening, gazing at Shadow's powerful build. "Show everyone what you two can do." Jamal's eyes widened at the thought. The county fair was the biggest event in town. Races, rides, and more than enough attention. But the Duvals always won. Their horse, Thunderbolt, was the favorite every year, sleek and perfectly trained. But something inside Jamal burned hotter than fear or doubt. "Why not?" he said quietly. "If we win, maybe they'll see we belong here too." The plan became their secret. By day, Jamal attended school, kept his head down, ignored the laughter and pointed fingers. By night, he and Carlos worked tirelessly. Jamal studied videos about horse racing, read every article he could find. He built simple obstacles in the empty field, timing Shadow as they ran short sprints under the moon. Shadow was fast, raw, and wild, but smart too, learning every day. Angela, seeing their determination, threw herself into helping. She treated Shadow's leg with extra care, cooked hearty meals for the boys, and tracked down an old racing saddle through a friend. Jamal began to dream, really dream, of crossing the finish line ahead of Thunderbolt, of hearing the crowd cheer for them, for once. Some nights, fear crept in, whispering that none of this would work, that the Duvals and their power would crush any hope. But then he'd look at Shadow, healed and strong, eyes shining with new life, and remember why he started this journey. Not for revenge, not even for respect, but for something bigger, for a chance at a new beginning, for both of them. As summer deepened and the fair drew near, Jamal knew the battle was only beginning. But for the first time, he welcomed the challenge. He had a purpose, a team, and a horse who believed in him as much as he believed in himself. And in the heart of that old barn, a quiet hope burned brighter than all the gossip the town could muster. Late July brought relentless heat and air thick with anticipation. Hartswell's fairgrounds shimmered in the distance. But for Jamal and Carlos, the world shrank to the stretch of scrappy pasture behind the barn. The secret training had begun in earnest. By day, Jamal kept his head low at school and in town. By night, the fields came alive with whispered plans and the muffled thunder of hooves. Carlos helped Jamal rig up a crude training track, just a long oval traced with buckets and battered orange cones, borrowed from the roadside. Old radios on the fence played crowd noise they'd recorded off YouTube, the static and cheers blending with the song of crickets. Jamal wanted Shadow to be ready for everything, even the roar of people he'd never seen. On the first night, Jamal mounted Shadow, heart pounding as the horse shied at the static, eyes rolling white. "Easy, boy," Jamal murmured, hands trembling as he gripped the reins. He'd barely settled in the saddle when Shadow bolted at a sudden burst of applause from the speaker. Jamal clung on, barely, boots scraping the dry earth as Shadow thundered down the field, wild and uncertain. The run ended with Jamal in the dirt, breathless, the horse skittering away. Carlos sprinted over, worry and awe fighting on his face. "Man, you okay?" Jamal rolled to his feet, spitting dust and grinning through bruised shins. "We're learning," he said, brushing himself off. "Both of us." And they tried again. Day after day they worked. Sometimes it was 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Shadow was quick, almost too quick, his muscles eager but mind not yet calm. He spooked at every new sound, a barking dog, a dropped hammer, the shrill beep of the timer on Carlos's phone. More than once, Jamal wound up flat on his back, stars spinning overhead. Each time he stood and walked it off, jaw clenched but spirit unbroken. "We have to get it right, Shadow," he'd whisper. "They'll be waiting for us to mess up." Angela watched her son limp home, pants torn and arms streaked with dirt. She bit back her worries, seeing the fire in his eyes that had long been missing. One evening, as she dabbed ointment on a nasty scrape, she sat down beside him on the back steps. The porch light flickered, bugs swirling in the glow. "You know," she began, her voice soft, "when I was your age, I was scared of everything. The dark, falling, not being good enough for the world outside. Horses were the only place I felt strong. I'd sneak out to my uncle's ranch after dinner. Just me and whatever old nag they let me ride. One day, I fell. Hard, broke my wrist. I thought I'd never get back up. My mama told me, "You can't learn courage if you don't taste a little fear." I guess I forgot how much that mattered, until I saw you out there. Jamal looked down at his bruised knees, the words sinking in. "I'm scared, Mom. Not of riding, but of everyone waiting for me to fail, of letting Shadow down." Angela squeezed his shoulder. "That's how you know it's worth it, baby. It's not about the Duvals, not really. It's about you and that horse. He needs you to believe, even when nobody else does." The next evening, Jamal brought a new patience to the track. He talked to Shadow the way his mom talked to him, calm and steady. "I know you're scared," he murmured, walking the horse in circles before mounting. "But I'm right here, every step." He played the radio at half volume, letting the noise become background instead of terror. When Shadow tensed, Jamal didn't fight. He waited, breathed deep, let the fear pass. Little by little, the horse's eyes softened. His ears flicked toward Jamal's voice, trusting. The next run was better. They made it around the track without disaster, Carlos whooping from the sidelines. In the barn at night, the boys huddled over notebooks, sketching out training plans. Carlos became the strategist, timing each run with his dad's old stopwatch. "You gotta get off the start faster," he'd say, watching videos on his phone. "Thunderbolt's a rocket out the gate. We need Shadow to be sharp, not just fast." They built obstacles, low jumps, sudden turns, flags waving on laundry lines. Jamal and Shadow learned together. Sometimes they failed spectacularly. Jamal tumbling into a pile of hay, Shadow spooking and running for the fence. But sometimes, just sometimes, everything clicked, and Jamal felt like he was flying. The air rushed past, the earth blurred beneath them, and the weight of small-town stares and Duval sneers faded into nothing. The day before the fair, Angela brought out her old boots. Weathered leather, the toes scuffed and the soles worn thin. "They're lucky," she said, setting them by the door. "Wore them for every show I ever rode." Jamal took them with trembling hands, heart full. That night, Jamal lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His body ached, his nerves thrummed with dread and hope. He thought about every time he'd been called a thief, every time he'd been overlooked, every time someone told him he didn't belong. He thought about Shadow, sleeping in the barn, and his mom, humming to herself as she packed their lunch for tomorrow. He let the memories twist into something brighter, a single burning determination. Dawn came hot and bright, and Jamal woke to Carlos pounding on the door, grinning like it was Christmas. "Let's go, champ!" Together they walked to the barn, where Shadow stood waiting, sleek and ready. Angela hugged her son tight. "No matter what happens, you already made me proud." Jamal saddled Shadow in silence, hands steady for once. As they led the horse out into the sunlight, Jamal felt a sense of peace settle over him, as if the months of worry and struggle had finally made room for something better. "Let's give them a race to remember," he whispered to Shadow, and the horse tossed his head, muscles coiled with energy. As they set off down the dusty road to the fairgrounds, the whole town felt like it was watching. Jamal didn't flinch. For the first time, he knew what it meant to believe in himself, and in the wild, shining hope of a horse named Shadow. The fairgrounds pulsed with excitement, banners snapping in the breeze and the smell of fried food drifting on the hot air. Jamal had walked past these gates 100 times, always as an outsider. Just another face in the crowd, someone to be ignored or whispered about. But this time, with Shadow's reins in his hand and Carlos by his side, Jamal felt the crowd's eyes lock on him with a strange mixture of curiosity and disbelief. People fell silent as he led Shadow past the rows of trailers and glossy, well-groomed horses. There were mutters, some half admiring, some sharp with old resentment. A little girl tugged her father's sleeve, whispering, "Daddy, is that the boy who saved the black horse?" The man frowned, then looked away, but Jamal saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe respect, maybe just surprise. At the end of the row, the Duvals were already waiting. Travis lounged by Thunderbolt's stall, arms crossed, a smug smile spread across his face. Thunderbolt himself looked every bit the champion, tall, gleaming with perfect muscles, eyes fierce and focused. "Well, well," Travis drawled as Jamal approached. "Didn't think you'd actually show, city boy. You really think that scrawny mutt stands a chance against Thunderbolt?" Jamal didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on Travis, voice steady. "We'll see." Reed snickered from the corner. "Try not to embarrass yourself. Folks come here to watch real horses race, not strays in charity cases." Jamal led Shadow to the paddock and began brushing him down, hands moving steady and sure despite the tension swirling around them. Carlos helped, passing water and checking the saddle one last time. "Ignore them," Carlos whispered, his tone fierce. "This is your day." Angela arrived just as the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, calling all racers to the track. She squeezed Jamal's hand, pride and nerves shining in her eyes. "Remember what matters, Jamal. No matter how they look at you, you belong here." The crowd buzzed louder as the riders lined up. Jamal mounted Shadow, settling his weight and whispering soft encouragements. "We've come too far to quit now. I'm with you every step. No fear, just us." They trotted to the starting line. Travis, resplendent in a new blue jacket, sat tall on Thunderbolt, casting one last smirk Jamal's way. The starting bell echoed through the stands, sharp, electric, a moment that split the day in two. With a surge of energy, Shadow sprang forward, muscles bunching beneath Jamal as they shot down the track. For a split second, everything blurred. The roar of the crowd, the pounding hooves, the dust rising behind them. Jamal's heart raced in perfect time with Shadow's stride. But disaster struck at the first turn. Thunderbolt, inches ahead, veered sharply, crowding Shadow against the fence. Jamal felt the old fear claw at his chest as Shadow stumbled, hooves scrabbling for purchase in the churned dirt. The crowd gasped, and someone laughed from the sidelines, a harsh, familiar sound. "No," Jamal whispered, gripping the reins tighter, steadying his seat. "We don't give up, not now." He loosened his hold, giving Shadow room to find his balance, and called out in the same soothing tone he'd used under moonlight for months. "Easy, boy. You're all right. We got this." Shadow hesitated, then found his feet, his powerful legs pumping as he surged back into motion. They fell behind for a breathless moment, the distance between them and Thunderbolt stretching out like a dare. But Jamal focused on the rhythm, counting each stride, blocking out the noise. At the halfway mark, a hush fell over the stands as Shadow began to close the gap. Jamal urged him on with gentle pressure, never harsh, never desperate. He felt the bond between them, every night of fear, every moment of trust, become a force stronger than anything Travis or the town could throw at them. Thunderbolt was fast, but Shadow was determined. They gained inch by inch, then stride by stride. As the final stretch approached, the crowd leaned forward, pulled in by the spectacle of a boy and his rescue horse defying the odds. Angela's voice rang out, clear and strong. "Go, Jamal, go!" Jamal could see the finish line, white and gleaming in the sun. He pressed closer to Shadow's neck, urging him on with a final whispered promise. "Let's finish what we started. Together," Shadow responded, his body lengthening in a burst of speed. For one breathtaking second, Thunderbolt and Shadow were neck and neck, dust flying, every muscle screaming. Travis shouted something, angry, afraid, but Jamal didn't hear. All he knew was the wind in his face, the power beneath him, and the weight of every person who'd ever said he didn't belong. With a final desperate push, Shadow edged forward, his nose crossing the line just ahead of Thunderbolt's. The stands erupted in stunned silence, followed by a wave of applause that swelled and broke over Jamal like a tide. He slid off Shadow, legs shaking, and buried his face in the horse's mane. Carlos sprinted over, hugging him so hard Jamal almost fell. Angela was there in an instant, tears in her eyes, pride radiating from her every pore. Behind them, Travis sat stunned, unable to hide the shock twisting his features. For once, the Duval name didn't mean victory. All around, the crowd buzzed with excitement, some shocked, some grudgingly admiring, and many, especially the kids, cheering openly. Jamal took Shadow's reins and walked him in a slow circle, letting the horse calm down as he met the eyes of the crowd. In those faces, Jamal saw doubt give way to something else. Maybe possibility. Maybe hope. For the first time, he didn't care what anyone thought. He'd raced with everything he had, and together, he and Shadow had won. As the fair officials hurried over, cameras flashing, and the crowd surged forward, Jamal realized that he'd given them more than a race. He'd given them a story. A reason to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, courage and kindness really could beat the odds. The moments after Shadow's stunning victory hung in the air, thick with disbelief and raw emotion. The crowd was slow to react at first, shock holding them silent before it finally cracked open. A sound like a dam bursting, applause and cheers mixing with shouts and the buzz of cell phones snapping photos. Jamal barely heard it all. His arms were tight around Shadow's neck, the horse snorting and blowing in deep, shuddery breaths, both of them soaked in sweat and dust, and something like joy. Angela rushed forward, arms outstretched, and Jamal fell into her embrace. Carlos whooped and threw an arm around them both, shouting, "We did it! You did it, man!" The three of them clung together, the world blurring into color and noise. But not everyone was celebrating. In the winner's circle, Travis Duval stalked toward the judge's booth, face twisted in outrage. His father, red-faced and bristling, marched behind him, voice rising above the commotion. "That wasn't a fair race. There's no way that mutt of a horse beat Thunderbolt. We demand a rematch, a test, an inspection, something. This is a disgrace." A hush fell over the crowd. All eyes shifted from Jamal's small circle of joy to the Duval's boiling anger. One of the fair officials raised a hand, trying to restore order. Now, let's just get the facts," he said, glancing nervously between Mr. Duval and Jamal. Animal control officers and the county vet stepped forward, summoned by the sudden uproar. They examined Shadow, their hands professional, gentle as they checked his legs, scanned his neck, and reviewed his paperwork. One officer nodded at Angela. "This horse is clean, no sign of tampering, no performance drugs. He's not chipped, but he's healthy, and he was obviously rescued and cared for. It's all in order." The vet, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s, stepped up to the microphone. "There's no evidence of cheating here. The boy and his horse won fair and square. Sometimes, the best heart wins over the best pedigree." Travis exploded. "That horse was ours. He has to be. No way a nobody like him just finds a horse like that. This is theft, pure and simple." The mayor, who'd been watching everything from the steps, suddenly raised his voice. silencing the bickering. Enough. Mr. Duval, you know the rules as well as anyone. If your family truly lost a horse, you should have reported it months ago, not just today. He turned to Jamal, his gaze piercing but not unkind. Son, you brought this horse back from the edge. You played by the rules. The fair stands by its winner. A ripple ran through the crowd. Some folks nodded in approval. Others grumbled under their breath. But the story was out. Whispers about Jamal risking everything to save Shadow, about the Duval's anger, about how the town's favorite hadn't just lost, but been outdone by a boy most folks had never bothered to notice. Reporters from the local paper and a few big city outlets circled in, shoving microphones at Jamal and Angela. One asked, "How does it feel to win after everything you've been through?" Another called out, "What do you say to people who claim you didn't deserve this victory?" Jamal swallowed hard, feeling the old nerves threaten to rise. But Angela squeezed his shoulder, and Carlos nodded at him from the sidelines, all silent encouragement. Jamal found his voice, shaky but true. "I didn't do this for a trophy," he said, words tumbling out. "Shadow was left out there to die. I just wanted to help him, give him a second chance. All we wanted was to prove that where you come from doesn't matter half as much as what you're willing to fight for." That answer caught in the air, and for a long moment, nobody moved. It was the mayor who broke the silence. "We talk a lot about fairness and tradition in this town," he said, turning so everyone could hear. "But sometimes tradition gets used as a shield for things we know are wrong. Today, we saw something better. We saw a young man stand tall in the face of every obstacle, and we saw a community given a chance to be better than its past. I, for one, think we owe Jamal and his family an apology, and our thanks." His words landed with a weight that made some bristle, but most folks stood a little straighter, eyes softer, as the Duval's protest faded. Even Travis, chest heaving, couldn't summon another retort. The mayor nodded toward the Duvals. "I suggest you shake hands and congratulate the winner. That's what real sportsmanship looks like." It was painful to watch, but in front of everyone, Mr. Duval finally stuck out his hand, lips pressed thin. "Congratulations, Jamal," he muttered, his pride burning but forced into submission by the weight of the moment. Travis mumbled something similar, eyes locked on the ground. Angela hugged her son again, this time so tight it almost hurt. "You did more than win a race," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You changed something today. You made them see you." Carlos bounced beside them, triumphant. "Bro, you're a legend now. Seriously, did you see their faces?" Jamal grinned, the tension in his shoulders dissolving, laughter bubbling up. Kids from school, some black, some white, some Latino, ran up to pat Shadow, wide-eyed and smiling. "You really did it, Jamal. He's the fastest horse I've ever seen." Jamal saw the wonder in their faces, the way the old lines between us and them seemed, for a moment, to disappear. As the crowd drifted away, Angela shook hands with the mayor, who leaned in and spoke quietly. "You and your son, both of you, you're the pride of this fair." She promised to help start a youth mentorship group, inspired by Jamal's story, and the mayor said the town needed more stories like his. As dusk settled on the fairgrounds, Jamal stood by Shadow, brushing his mane, letting the calm soak in. It wasn't just a win, it was justice, hard fought and earned in the open. The sting of old wounds faded just a little, replaced by something Jamal hadn't felt in years: hope. He led Shadow home under the first stars, Carlos and Angela by his side, a little parade through streets that, for once, didn't feel so cold. Jamal knew tomorrow there would still be doubters, still be fights to win. But tonight, the world felt wider, kinder, and that was enough. News of Shadow's victory spread through Hartswell like wildfire. The next morning, Jamal woke to a house that felt lighter than air, the kind of lightness that only comes after months of darkness have finally cracked open. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the sunlight splashed across his ceiling, unsure if he'd dreamed it all. Downstairs, Angela was humming, actually humming, while frying eggs, a sound Jamal hadn't heard since his grandmother was alive. Carlos was already at the door, bouncing on his toes. "You see your phone yet? You're everywhere, man. The local paper, some TV station from Dallas. They're calling you the kid who beat the odds." He shoved his phone at Jamal, grinning wide. Headlines scrolled by. "Young hero saves horse, stuns town." And there, front and center, was a picture of Jamal and Shadow crossing the finish line, joy and disbelief written plain on both their faces. But the biggest surprise came at school. The place that once felt like enemy territory had changed overnight. In the halls, the usual whispers were different. Instead of cold shoulders and muttered insults, kids nodded, even smiled. A group of younger kids gathered near Jamal's locker, eyes wide. "Can we come see Shadow sometime?" one asked shyly. "I want to learn how to brush him, like you do." The teachers, too, seemed to look at him differently. Mr. Ferguson, who'd once accused Jamal of cheating on a math test, clapped him on the back and said, "Heard you gave those Duvals a run for their money. Good for you, son." Jamal wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry, so he just nodded, feeling the weight of every lonely year begin to lift. But it was more than just polite nods and headlines. Real change, slow and a little awkward, began to ripple through town. It started with kids, black, white, Latino, a few whose families had always kept to themselves, showing up after school at the old barn. Some brought bags of carrots and apples. Others just wanted to watch or help sweep the stalls. Jamal found himself teaching, almost by accident, how to hold a brush, how to talk softly so the animals wouldn't spook, how patience mattered more than brute strength. Shadow soaked up the attention, standing proud and tall while little hands patted his flank and friends laughed in the afternoon sun. The barn became a kind of clubhouse, filled with new faces, clumsy kindness, and the constant low rumble of hope. For once, there was no Duval, no Travis sneering in the corner. Instead, Reed Duval's little sister showed up, quiet and unsure, holding a shy kitten she'd found by the creek. Jamal didn't hesitate. "Want to help me feed Shadow?" he asked, and she smiled, shy but genuine. Angela saw the change too. She watched from the kitchen window as Jamal led groups of kids through chores, his old loneliness traded for laughter and purpose. Inspired, she reached out to the mayor and the school principal, pitching an idea that had long lived in her heart: a youth mentorship program built around caring for animals and giving every kid, no matter their background, a place to belong. The mayor agreed, still glowing with pride from the fair. "If it worked for Jamal and Shadow, maybe it'll work for the rest of us too," he said. He set aside some of the town's budget, and soon Angela was running her own after-school program at the barn, teaching not just about horses, but about kindness, respect, and standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. Not everyone changed, of course. Some of the older folks at the diner still muttered about upstarts and troublemakers, still grumbled when they saw Angela's car parked at the barn. But the grip of old prejudices had loosened. When one customer tried to make a snide comment within earshot, Miss Loretta, the same cashier who once turned a blind eye, spoke up. "You should have seen that boy out there. The way he and that horse ran. There's nothing left to talk about but pride." Even Carlos's father, who'd always warned his son not to get involved with the wrong crowd, came by the barn one afternoon, hat in hand. He watched Jamal work with Shadow for a long time before speaking. "You did good, son. Real good. You proved a lot of people wrong, including me." Carlos grinned, thumping his dad on the back as Jamal smiled, a quiet victory passing between them. The changes spread wider, little by little. Teachers asked Jamal to speak at assemblies about perseverance and kindness. Local businesses donated feed and supplies for the barn. Angela's mentorship program grew, drawing volunteers from across town, some of whom had never set foot on a farm before. The barn, once abandoned and forgotten, had become a living symbol of what Hartswell could be when people worked together. Jamal felt the difference in himself, too. He walked with his shoulders back, met people's eyes, and spoke with a voice that didn't tremble. The anger and shame that had once shadowed every day had faded, replaced by a sense of belonging that went deeper than any trophy. Shadow, ever faithful, followed him everywhere, the two of them a living reminder that being seen, truly seen, could change more than just one life. One Saturday, as the sun dipped low and the barn was alive with laughter, Angela gathered everyone in a circle. She looked at Jamal, pride shining in her eyes. It started with one act of kindness, and look how far it's come. "I want you all to remember, what we build together, no one can ever take away." Jamal looked around at the faces, some familiar, some new, all glowing with hope. For the first time, he let himself believe in a future brighter than the past, a place where every kid, every family could belong. He reached for Shadow's mane, feeling the horse's steady strength, and knew in his heart that the old chains had been broken for good. And as dusk fell over the barn, laughter echoing into the night, Jamal realized this was only the beginning of healing, of change, of a story bigger than any single race or victory. A month had passed since the county fair, but its impact on Jamal's life, and on Hartswell, ran deeper than any trophy could measure. Jamal found himself standing in the cool shadow of the barn one morning, listening to the early calls of birds, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams cutting through the old slats. The world felt different, lighter, and yet somehow more real. He realized, as he ran his hand down Shadow's smooth neck, that they had both been changed by what they'd survived together. Shadow was thriving, his coat shone like polished coal, his eyes bright and eager as he nickered for Jamal's attention. Kids came by the barn almost every day, bringing treats or just sitting nearby as Shadow grazed, finding peace in the horse's gentle presence. Sometimes Jamal would find himself surrounded by a dozen voices, all asking questions at once, about training, about racing, about how he and Shadow became friends. He answered them honestly, never sugarcoating the struggle, always ending with a quiet smile and a truth that resonated deeper than anything he'd learned in school. "Sometimes, the hardest journeys make the best stories," he'd say. "You just have to keep moving, even when it hurts." Angela's youth mentorship program grew quickly, drawing more kids and adults than she'd dared hope. She started organizing monthly gatherings at the barn, turning it into a safe haven for anyone in need of kindness or a fresh start. The mayor and the school principal dropped by regularly, not just for speeches, but to help with chores or watch the kids work together, laughing and learning with dirt under their nails. The barn became a place where differences faded, replaced by a common purpose, where old grudges softened and new friendships formed over the shared love for animals and hard work. One crisp afternoon, as Jamal led a group of kids in mucking stalls, he paused to watch the sun set beyond the fields. The sky was ablaze with color, the air humming with distant crickets. Shadow wandered nearby, stopping now and then to nudge a younger child, or let someone braid wildflowers into his mane. The peace of that moment felt almost sacred, like a reward for every night of fear and doubt they had survived. As the fair approached again, the county organizers announced a new annual event inspired by Jamal's story, a rescue race, where only horses saved from abandonment or neglect could enter. The rules were simple. Every rider had to tell their horse's story and show how they'd helped one another. Jamal and Shadow were invited as guests of honor to open the inaugural race. The invitation brought pride, but also a quiet awe that sometimes stopped Jamal in his tracks. Could he really have changed so much in so little time? The night before the event, Jamal sat with Angela on the porch, the air sweet with honeysuckle. She poured 2 glasses of iced tea and handed him one, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Did you ever think, all those months ago, that things would turn out like this?" she asked. Jamal shook his head, smiling. "Not in a million years. Back then, it felt like the world was just waiting for me to mess up again, like nobody even wanted to see me unless I failed." I guess Shadow felt the same way. Left out, abandoned. Angela rested her hand on his. "But you both got up. Every time. That's what matters. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall in spite of it." Her voice was soft, but every word sank deep. He thought about the truth of it as the stars came out, each one reminding him of a night spent sneaking through fields, fighting back tears or doubt or anger. He thought about his grandma's stories and how those old words about mustangs running free had always sounded like distant dreams. Now, he realized, dreams just needed hard work, and sometimes a little help from someone who believes in you. The day of the rescue race arrived bright and cool. Jamal wore his lucky boots and his cleanest shirt, feeling nerves flutter in his stomach as he led Shadow into the sunlight. The stands were filled, not just with town folks, but visitors from other counties. People who'd read about their story, who wanted to see what hope looked like when it ran on 4 legs. Before the race, Jamal was asked to speak. He took the microphone, hands trembling, but the sight of so many familiar faces, Carlos and his family, Angela beaming with pride, even Reed Duval's little sister waving from the front row, gave him strength. He cleared his throat and began. "Shadow and I, we both know what it's like to be forgotten, to wonder if anyone will ever see what you're worth. When I found him, he was trapped, hurt, and scared. I was too in my own way. But every night I came back, we both healed a little. Not because it was easy, but because we didn't give up on each other." He glanced at Shadow, who tossed his head as if agreeing. Jamal smiled, voice steadying. "A lot of folks will tell you that you can't change the world, that some things are just the way they are. But I learned something different. True worth isn't handed to you. It's earned, one small act of courage at a time. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is help someone else rise with you." As the applause rolled over him, Jamal felt the last remnants of old pain lift away. The fairground, once a place of humiliation, was now a stage for something bigger than rivalry or pride. It was a place of second chances, of redemption and hope. After the speech, Jamal led Shadow for a slow lap, waving at the crowd. Dozens of new rescue horses lined up at the starting gate, each with a kid or grown-up beside them, each carrying their own story of loss and survival. The race itself was less about speed and more about spirit, about showing the world what a second chance could look like. Jamal watched with pride as the kids he'd mentored cheered on the newcomers, no longer divided by the old lines of race or money or family name. That evening, as the barn settled into quiet, Jamal sat in the straw, Shadow nuzzling at his shoulder. He thought back on all the days he'd wanted to give up, all the moments he'd felt invisible. Now, as dusk fell and the sounds of laughter drifted in from the house, he realized how far they'd come. "Thank you, Shadow," Jamal whispered, running his fingers through the horse's mane. "For believing in me, for showing me that we're never really alone, even when the world tries to make us feel that way." The barn doors stood open to the night, letting in the cool breeze, and Jamal closed his eyes, breathing in the promise of tomorrow. He knew there would always be hard days, new struggles, new doubts, but he also knew he had the strength to face them, and that he'd spend his life helping others find theirs too. That was the real victory, he thought. Not the ribbon, not even the applause, but the legacy left behind. Proof that courage is contagious, and that every act of kindness ripples further than we can ever see. And so, in a small Texas town forever changed by one boy and his horse, Jamal stood tall. His story, and Shadow's, was just beginning.